Hi there, this is Christopher Panaretos, author of the Languages book series on Amazon. And in this video, I'm going to be showing how to translate a sentence from English into Indonesian. So the sentence to translate is going to be the sentence, she will give him the car. So, pretty basic sentence. So the step one is going to be to figure out what kind of a sentence we have. So kind of stepping through it, we've got our subject she, and then we've got a verb, and then we have a direct object, which is getting passed to the indirect object him. So those four components are subject, verb, indirect object, and direct object. Okay, and when you have these four components, that is actually called a ditransitive scene. This is our English version. And then we can also fill in the words here if we want to. So we have a she, and then we have will give, and then him, and then we have the car. So to translate this into Indonesian, it's a good idea to keep the same type of scene because we want to preserve as much of the original meaning as possible. So Indonesian, of course, is a different language from English, so we should probably double check to see what the order of components are in that ditransitive scene in Indonesian. So I'm going to go down to my word order section, and there's a section on scenes, and then we go down and just check the ditransitive scene in Indonesian. And it looks like it's subject first, then verb, and then the indirect and direct objects, which happens to be the same order as we do have in English. So I'll just copy that down, and then since we haven't done any translating yet, I'll just fill in the English words for now, and then we'll translate them one by one. So to start the translation, we'll start with the first component here, the subject. So we've got English's she. I'm going to translate that into Indonesian. Of course, she is a personal pronoun, and we are interested in the Indonesian personal pronoun. So let's investigate the Indonesian personal pronoun a little bit. So I'm going to go up to the summary of Indonesian section, find the personal pronoun entry, and it says it's got two characteristics. One is perspective and one is count. Perspective and count. And we would like to fill these features in. So perspective, of course, we know she is third person perspective, and we know the count is singular. So to find the proper translation of she into Indonesian, we just need the spelling table of the Indonesian personal pronoun, which is given right here. So these are different spellings for the Indonesian personal pronoun. We are interested in a spelling that matches the third person singular features. So third person singular. So we have several options. We have dia, we have ila, and we have beliau. And then we've also got a suffix version. I'm not sure the difference between these. So I'm going to go to Google Translate, and I'm just going to type in some of these. So this first one, dia, looks like it can mean either he or she. Let's try, where was it? Here it is. We have the second one, which is ia. Looks like that one could be also he or she. And then we've got beliau. So we could try beliau. And again, it could be either he or she. So I'm not sure which one is preferred. So I guess I'll just choose the first one, dia, and we'll go with that one. Okay, so we've translated she as dia. So I can copy my working translation down here. I'll get rid of the word she and I'll replace it with our Indonesian translation. Go down to the next page here. Now we can focus on the second component, which is the verb. So we have English's will give, which is a version of our infinitive to give. And then we want to translate this into Indonesia. And then we're going to have some main verb. You could call it the infinitive form also. But in Indonesian, it's kind of helpful to think about it as a main verb. And this is going to be Indonesian verb. So we should probably investigate the Indonesian verb a little bit to learn more about it. So in the summary on Indonesian verbs, it says that they have two characteristics, tense and aspect. So I'll write those two features here. And I want to just double check the spelling rules. So in the spelling rules for verbs, it says that the verbs do not change spelling. However, tense and aspect are indicated with extra words called auxiliary verbs. So we're not going to have to worry about spelling too much, but we are going to worry about adding some extra words if we need to. So in terms of filling in our features for our verb, we have future tense because we have will give, and then our aspect in English at least is imperfect. So the first thing we need to do is to figure out our main verb, which is going to be to give. So I want to go to Google Translate. I'll type in to give, and it's giving me this term memberi. And I want to double check this Indonesian word in Wiktionary. So Wiktionary is an online dictionary, has words in a lot of different languages. I typed in this memberi. I got an Indonesian entry. It is listed as a verb here. And then it says it's an active form of bury. So bury may be the main verb, the sort of base spelling of the verb. Yeah, it basically means to give something. So I think maybe we can go with the word bury. Okay, so bury will be our main verb. And in order to give the additional meaning of future tense, and possibly aspect, we might want to add an auxiliary verb and include that along with our main verb bury, right? So I'll go down to the verb section and show you how Indonesian verbs work. So for this verb to go, so a different verb, we have our infinitive form of our English verb to go. The infinitive form of the Indonesian verb, or the main verb, is pergi. And you can see that regardless of whether you're in past, present, or future tense, or what the aspect is, the spelling of the main verb is always the same, right? It's always pergi. And then you can see that there's some other words. So, for example, past tense is often can be indicated with this word sudah, and then we have the future tense, which can be indicated with this word akan. Okay, so we happen to have a future tense for our Indonesian verb. So I think it'd be a good idea to take this auxiliary verb akan, and we'll include that. We'll combine it with our main verb, and so we'll get a compound verb with two words. And essentially, what we're doing here is we have our auxiliary verb, which has the meaning of future tense, and then we're going to combine that with our main verb bury, which has the meaning of to give. So if you take the meaning of give and you add to it the tense of being in the future, you're going to end up with a meaning that's similar to English's will give. So that's the goal here. We want to try to replicate the same, verb, tense, and aspect that we have in English, as well as obviously the meaning. So we're going to use akan bury as our translation of English's will give. Okay. So I'll take akan bury and I will replace that with for will give. Okay, so let's move on to the next component here. We have the indirect object. So him is a personal pronoun. So we want to translate him into Indonesian. It is a personal pronoun, and of course it is an Indonesian personal pronoun that we're interested in translating. And actually, we did a personal pronoun earlier, so we instead of looking up in the Learn Indonesian for Beginners book, we can just go up to our previous work. And we have for Indonesian personal pronouns, they have two features. They've got perspective and count. So I'm going to write those features here. Perspective and count. And we want to fill these in. So him is going to be third person, and the count is going to be singular, right? Matching our English word. And so again, to find the proper spelling, we're going to need the spelling table for the Indonesian personal pronoun. And it is shown in the book here in the pronoun section. And so our third person singular is going to be third person singular. It's going to be one of the words in this block here. And this was the same block that we used for she, third person singular. So we used dia before. We have these other options here, ia, beliau. And then we also have this suffix nya, which we can also use. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure what the best option is for our word him. We probably don't want to use the same word that we did before for she, right? So we have she is dia, and then if we have him, if we also have dia here, I'll write it up here, and this would be him. We're using the same word for two different people in the sentence, so that probably doesn't make sense to do that. So I think probably we should use a different one. So we could try, using either ia. We could use beliau. Another thing we could try is using the suffix version, which is actually often used for like direct objects or indirect objects. And I can show this to you. So if we go down to our section on indirect objects, right, personal pronouns as indirect objects. If we well, not this one. Here we've got an independent word that's being used as the indirect object. Here we have actually, this is a good example. So we have the English sentence, he throws her the ball, which is the same structure that we have, of course, as he will, he gives, she gives him the car, right? It's basically the same. They're both ditransitive scenes, right? So ditrans, and then we've got another ditransitive scene here. Okay, so you can see that in this particular translation into Indonesia of this, he throws her the ball. We have the translation of he, then we have the translation of throws, and then we have the translation of the direct object. And then this translation of her actually becomes a prepositional phrase. We have this word kepada. We can type that into Google Translate, and it's listed as a preposition here. So it seems that in this particular translation, this translation in Indonesian is technically a monotransitive scene. However, if you forget about, if you kind of loosen the requirements here for what a ditransitive scene is or an indirect object is, you have this preposition, and then you have this third person singular suffix. So basically, the sentence you could say is he throws the ball to her, right? Or you could just say like, hey, we're going to use this preposition as if it's just one indirect object. So he throws to her the ball, and then you could just call this just sort of imagine this is a ditransitive scene, right? So even though technically you have this preposition word, you could just really just act as if this phrase was the indirect object because it really gives you the same meaning anyway, right? So what's the difference? So we could potentially use this structure for our particular translation, and then we would have this sort of loosened requirement for what constitutes an indirect object. We can look at another example. So here's another one where it's just individual word is the indirect object, although they do also use this preposition as well. And then here again, there's a preposition. So whoever did these translations really liked using the preposition. Let's see, capada, capada, capada. And then here there's no capada. It's just a personal pronoun. So maybe what we'll do for this is we'll actually use this prepositional structure. So we'll use the word capada, and then we'll use our suffix form of nya, which is our third person singular suffix form. And then we'll just consider this. So I'll write it down here. Capada nya. This is 2, right? And then we'll say this is him. And then we'll say technically a prepositional phrase, but pretend it's a indirect object, right? Because that's apparently pretty. That's a common way to express the indirect object in Indonesian. So let's do that. Let's do that. We'll turn this into indirect object in English, which is just a preposition or just a pronoun. We'll turn it into a preposition plus a pronoun, and just pretend that this prepositional phrase is just a single indirect object. And of course, these are combined, so it just ends up being one word, but it's really 2 words, right? So you have 2 and then him, and it gives the same meaning as the indirect object. Okay, so let's do that, and I'll copy my working translation down here. I'm going to get rid of our English indirect object, and I'll replace it with our Indonesian sort of version of a direct object or indirect object. I'll copy our working translation down here, and we can move on to the final component, which is the direct object. And we have 2 words, of course, that we need to translate. So we've got car, which is a thing in Indonesian. And there may be some set of features for the car. And then we've also got our word the, which is a definite article in Indonesian. And so we'll have to check and see if Indonesian has a definite article or not. And it may or may not have some set of features. So we'll investigate. So let's take a look at Indonesian things first. So if we go up to the summary of Indonesian here, we've got entry on Indonesian things. So here it says that Indonesian things have one characteristic. They've got count. So I'll write count here. And of course, from our English spelling, we have car, which is singular. And to find the translation of car into Indonesian, we're just going to have to look it up in Google Translate because there's no way to guess. So I'll type in car into Google Translate. It's giving me this translation of mobile in Indonesian. And I just want to double check that this word is the correct one. So I'll go to Wiktionary, I'll type in mobile. And I'm going to look for an Indonesian entry. Here we have one. And looks like here it is listed, one of its meanings is listed as a noun. Here's the base spelling. And we've got a couple other forms, possessive forms with different spellings. You can see we've got our NYA ending. That's sort of serving as a possessive indicator now. But this is a good word for car. So I'm going to take this term as our translation of car. And let's move on to the trying to translate the definite article. So in terms of articles, the entry on Indonesian articles here says that Indonesian does not use the indefinite article. It doesn't use the indefinite article either, but we're interested in the definite article. So it simply does not exist in the language. If we go down to the spelling section, again, it says that the definite article does not exist. So technically, the Indonesian definite article uh, does not exist. So we could just sort of end it there and say, yeah, we're just going to ignore, we're just going to ignore the trying to translate the definite article. So if that's the case, we would sort of end up with just our word for car. But there is another option. So our first option is just we translate car, and that's the only word we translate. However, in Indonesian, there is a second option, and that second option is going to be to use a different descriptor called a demonstrative descriptor, which will I'll point to a specific car. And I'll show you how that works in Indonesian. So if we go down to our definite article section here, so here we have, for example, in this sentence, we have the car is in the garage. And the translation into Indonesian is we have our word mobil, which means car. But then we have this other descriptor here called pronounced itu in Indonesian, which can be translated as that, right? So we're saying basically that car is in the garage, like literally speaking. But it kind of has the same meaning as saying the definite article, the car. So if we wanted to, we could potentially include this descriptor itu to kind of point at a specific car and give that extra meaning of like having a particular car in mind. So in English, we would say that car, right? Of course, in Indonesian, the order of descriptors is car actually should come first, and then you put the adjective afterwards. So literally speaking, it would be car that. So we have our two options here. We can just translate the word car, which is mobile, or we could use we could translate car, and then we could also translate this extra word in Indonesian, or we could add this extra word in Indonesian to point out a specific car that we're interested in. So I'm not sure which one's better. I'm not a native Indonesian speaker, so you'd have to ask somebody which one they sort of would normally say or which one they prefer. I kind of like adding this extra descriptor because it does indicate that it's a specific car that we're referring to. So I'm going to go with this second option here for our translation. So here we have, if we retranslate back into English, we've got our personal pronoun for she. We've got our verb, compound verb that means will give. And then we've got our kind of jury-rigged indefinite or indirect article, which means to him, that we're just treating as an indefinite article. And then we have our meaning of a specific car, right? Car, that car, right? So this is the translation that we are going to use for this particular sentence. Of course, we started with our English translation. She will give him the car, and we ended up with dia akan beri kepada kepadanya mobil itu. And so I'm going to put a period at the end. I'm going to get rid of these extra symbols here. And I'll capitalize the first sentence. And so this is our translation of English's "She will give him the car." And this should be a pretty decent translation. Hopefully it gets across the same meaning that we are intending with our English translation. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.